I think we'll start off with the watch, first of all. Pre-order, of course, starting today. Mixed reviews out there. Some saying it's just a gimmick. What's your view?
Well, you know, I think it's one of those devices that out of the gate, it's not a slam dunk. I've used the device. It takes a little bit of getting used to, and I think we haven't yet seen the killer application that it's going to make the Apple Watch a must-have. And until that application surfaces, I think it'll be a little bit rougher ride for Apple than some people anticipated.
Well, how does it compare, in your view, Tom, with the other companies which have already launched watches? I mean, we've already seen Samsung with its Gear out.
Yeah, I will say that the Apple Watch feels very much like a version 1 device, but in its defense, it is by far the best looking V1 versus anybody out there right now. So we've talked a little bit about Samsung. They've thrown a handful of units out into the market, and those have not resonated with people. They've really been tech first, and something people want to wear second. So I do think Apple has a leg up in terms of fit and finish and the quality of the object itself.
Yeah, a slow burn. People, didn't like the iPad when it came out. It got fairly, well, how can I say, poor reviews, didn't it, Tom? But that was a slow burn, wasn't it, certainly? And maybe V1 is not the best time to be buying a product like this.
No, I think there's some truth to that, and I think the iPad, again, was one of those devices that Apple put out into the market, and they told people, you need this, but a lot of people looked at it and said, hey, is that just a big iPod Touch? And it wasn't until they owned it, or a friend of theirs owned it, and they used it for a while when they began to figure out, okay, this is how it fits into my life.
Let's move on to the other product launch today, and that is, of course, the Galaxy S6 from Samsung. Now, they're hoping this phone turns things around for them against the iPhone. Will it? How good a device is it? And, well, what does Samsung have to do in order to get back and claw back market share?
Yeah, I think it's a bold move by Samsung. I think you could make the argument that they played it safe in the last couple iterations of their flagship phone, and with the S6 and the S6 Edge, they're really pushing forward on some things that only Samsung can do, which is to say, particularly on the Edge, there's only a handful of companies in the world that can create a display like that. And so what Samsung is trying to do with that product, I think, is make it more difficult for particularly the Chinese vendors that have been taking some of their market share to do a carbon copy of what they've created in the S6 Edge. So I think it's a move in the right direction, but it will be challenging.
Tom, the thing is they're using this Android operating system, and, it seems that really the only serious contender to that is the Apple operating system, where everybody else is using Android virtually, aren't they?
Yeah, and that's one of the challenges that I think Samsung faces, and if Samsung doesn't regain its footing, whoever replaces them, I think, ends up facing a very similar situation, which is that nobody owns the platform. Google owns the platform, and so it's very hard for the company, even a company the size of Samsung, to create a differentiated experience on a Samsung phone. So it's very easy, for example, for someone to own a Galaxy S3 and then 2 years later move over to an HTC One, for example, because they like the form factor better, because the Android experience is essentially the same.
Tom, I was reading your research note, and you were saying a lot will depend on what happens in the future with some of the seeds, as you put it, being planted by Samsung right now. What are those seeds, and how will they bear fruit?
Well, they have spent a fair amount of time and effort trying to grow an installed base of programmers who will create the right apps that would run specifically on Samsung either Android devices or their own Tizen operating system. So they have been trying to become more of a software company. The other thing that I think is interesting is, just like Apple has launched Apple Pay, Samsung is getting into the pay business as well. And so they're trying to create more points of stickiness so that it's not so easy to move off of a Samsung device and onto another Android device, because there's software, there's services, there's features that you can only find on a Samsung device that you won't find on another.
Yeah, you're talking about, of course, that acquisition of LoopPay. Now, just moving to this partnership they've got with Microsoft, how do they move that forward?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, and I think it speaks to the position that both of those companies are in. Microsoft's new CEO, I think, has got that company moving in the right direction, and they've become very keenly aware of the fact that their success is going to be driven by getting onto other successful platforms. And holding Office, for example, off of Android and iOS wasn't really serving Microsoft in the end. And now that they've announced this partnership with Samsung, they're clearly going to get their software and services onto a big platform. And I think net is good for both Samsung and Microsoft.